Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Derek Wright, who is the long-serving physio at Newcastle United.
Hi, Andy.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good. Your screen's frozen there, but I'm sure it'll come back shortly anyway. There you go. You're back now. So yeah, Derek, how are you doing? I did have a quick research. I knew you'd been there for a long time, but so you're saying 38 years this year.
38 years this year. My first manager was Jack Charlton. 1984 I came. So I came from Fulham. I was at Fulham for 3 years before Newcastle. And Jack was my first manager. But Jack called me Dennis all the way through my time here, his time here. So even when he came back years later, I was still Dennis to him. So I never had the heart to tell him any different that I was called Derek. So it was Dennis Wright for Jack.
Right, that was just a mistake. It wasn't a nickname or anything.
No. I think I don't know where he got Dennis from, but I'm sure he knew it was Derek. It was just his little way of humour, I think.
So how did you actually get involved in physio? Like, you're from the Northeast originally?
Yes, well, I was originally, I was an apprentice at Arsenal when I was 16, and unfortunately finished at 18. And Fred Street was the physio at Arsenal at that time. And I'd always sort of been interested in medicine at school, but didn't, obviously left at 16, so didn't do any A levels. But when I had to finish, I spoke to Fred and said I was interested in physio, and he actually put me on to a course initially remedial gymnastics. I think with the likes of Dave Galley and Mark Leather were on the same course. But that was at Pinderfields Hospital in Wakefield. So went there just after 18, 3 years there, and then did a conversion course at Bradford School of Physiotherapy, and then was basically in the health service at Northumberland Health Service in the Miners Rehabilitation Centre originally, which was a great ground, and really that was my first job, and it was all rehabilitation, and there were all Northumberland Geordie miners, which was a great education, not just in physiotherapy, really.
So that's quite interesting, because I think we've seen that. I mean, I've been involved in vocational rehab in work in the NHS, and that seemed to have died out, but it really feels like that's coming back. So with that, what would you describe what you were doing there? Was it getting people back to work or back to mining?
Yeah, it was. When I initially went there, they were all miners, and one of my first jobs there actually was to help build a model mine. So we actually built a shaft with pit props and a sort of a little wagon to push and that type of thing. So it was specifically for the miners, and we used to have back classes, leg classes, early leg classes, all the way through, sort of like a real rehabilitation centre. But then they opened up to the National Health, and then we took in sort of any National Health patients which was sort of needed sort of long-term rehab. But there was still, the majority of the patients were miners and looked after by the Miners Union. The Miners Union used to really look after these guys and keep them. It used to be sort of either a day case, or you used to be able to stay in the Miners Rehabilitation Centre initially. And the Miners Union used to give them free beer tokens every Thursday. And I used to drive the minibus up to the local village and drive them all back again. So that was part of the job at the time as well. But it was a great education, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there, really, and learned a lot about group classes and group education and sort of group exercise therapy, really. I mean, it was a real sort of grounding for that.
So have you seen those sort of things both like from an NHS perspective? I know you've not worked in there for a while, but could you take anything from that and use it in a football setting? And then also, have you seen anything like those rehabilitation centres still going on now?
Well, I think it's come around a little bit full circle now. I think when I first started, exercise therapy was the main sort of remit, if you like, and then it went through a period of, we used electrotherapy quite a bit, and then manual therapy. Now I think it is there's a lot of manual therapy, and exercise therapy is very, very important. And so I'm pleased it's sort of come full circle in a way. And now the younger physios seem to be sort of well educated in rehabilitation and exercise therapy. And it's quite exciting, and it's quite interesting for me because, I'm still learning now I'm 63 now, and there's still a lot to sort of look and educate and research. But I think the good thing for me is that it's come full circle and, coming back to the exercise therapy and rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And then, so in terms of moving away from that miners rehab centre and was it down to Fulham that you went?
Yes, well, I worked for a short spell at a mentally and physically handicapped hospital just for about 6 months, and then to Fulham after that. Malcolm MacDonald was the manager of Fulham at the time, and he was a player when I was an apprentice at Arsenal. So when I was at the hospital, I got a phone call inviting me, said would I be interested in coming for an interview. And so that the interview was next morning at 9:30. So I got on my little Fiat Panda at 3:30 in the morning and drove down. It took me 6 hours to get there for the interview at 9:30, but managed to get the job. And that was, I think I was about 21, 22 then, and stayed at Fulham for about just over 3 years. And it was a great club and had a great time. We actually got promoted my first season there, and we nearly went up to the old First Division. So we had a great 3 years. Ray Harford was one of the coaches, and Ray went on to coach Blackburn side with Kenny Dalglish. And Ray's, unfortunately, he passed away since then, but he was a good friend of mine at that time. But that was good education as well. It was a great club, and the player, we had a great set of players. And I was only young. It was my first job. Those days, you were everything really. You were physiotherapist, sports scientist, masseur, everything. So I was the only physio in the club, but it was great. There was plenty of work there and long hours, but thoroughly enjoyed my time there, and then to Newcastle after that.
So when you get that job at Fulham, then you've gone down there. So however long your notice period is, are you just basically right? I need to move to London then.
Yes, there was. I didn't realise at the time, but there was an advert went in the Fulham programme for someone to put up the new physiotherapist in Diggs, and there was a lovely family who, again, unfortunately, have passed away since then. But they put me up in just I don't know if you know Craven Cottage at all, but the houses just up from the ground. They had a house there, lovely houses, and I stayed there for a couple of years in Diggs, really. I think they were only supposed to put me up for a few weeks, but they couldn't get rid of me after that, and I was there for a few, certainly 2 years anyway.
Yes.
But they're a lovely family, and they were Fulham season ticket holders, so it was great time.
Yeah, it's a great spot right by the Thames, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was that was a great education. I actually played at the same time, I was physio and playing for the reserves at the same time, because I was only 23, and I'd sort of could still play basically, and I used to sort of play for the reserves, do their games. So having my bag at the side of the pitch, if anybody got injured, I used to have to run off the pitch, get the bag and run back on again, and start treating players and just getting funny looks from everybody on the other team, basically.
And was there ever any prospect of you playing for the first team?
No, definitely not. There was I think we played Watford reserves at Vicarage Road, actually. And Frank Clark, I think, was the manager of Orient. And Frank tells me this, he's told me this since, but he said he was, after the game, he was asking because I played centre forward for Fulham reserves that day, and he was asking who the centre forward was. So that's my only claim to fame. From nearly, Frank Clark was asking about me, but then the coach told Frank that I was the physiotherapist and they had to leave me alone, and so that would soon pay to that, really.
So you're at Fulham for a few years, but what was that like actually living down there then? So you've moved away from your home, you're living in digs. Like, what was your life like?
It was okay. I mean, I'd been in digs when I was 16 at Arsenal, so I was away from home then. So I was used to being away from home from an early age, really. When I was 22, 23 at Fulham, it's a different period of your life, really. You're able to go out a little bit more. I think from 16 to 18, I was sort of a little bit of a hermit, really, and tried to live the life of a dedicated footballer. At 23, you're sort of opening out a little bit. I had a couple of friends down there. So it was an enjoyable time, really, and it was sort of that area, Fulham, Putney, around by the Thames is lovely, really.
Yeah, West London's a stunning spot. So what prompted you to want to move back up north then?
No, I used to work. I got a phone call from a physiotherapist that I worked with at the Northumberland Miners Rehab Centre, and her brother was working at part-time at Newcastle, and they sort of were losing their physio, and they asked me would I be interested in coming for an interview with Jack Charlton. It's when the team came down to London, and so I met Jack at with the club doctor at the time. Dr. Keith Beveridge was the doctor at Newcastle. So I met Keith and Jack for an interview. I think it was near Lord's Cricket Ground, actually, the hotel near there, for an interview for the job. And Jack asked me if I liked fishing, and that was the only. I think that was the only question he asked me, actually. And Keith was a lovely man. He did most of the talking and most of the questioning, and then got offered the job, and that was it. It was nice to be able to move back home. I think my 3 years at Fulham was a great grounding in pro football and physiotherapy and football, really. And when I got the chance to come up here, that was it.
Yeah, so there was no hesitation in your mind. Was it the pull of Newcastle or Jack Charlton, or all of it?
I think the Newcastle, coming home, Newcastle were in the first division. They were doing quite well. I knew the obviously there was a potential of the club, and I knew the job probably had potential to open up and to sort of make maybe some sort of impact on it as well. So it was just a little bit intriguing, but I just was just keen to do it, really.
And so this must have been around the 80s then? Is this like the mid 80s?
Yes, that was 1984 when I came here. I was 26, and just the whole thing was it was surprising really, because probably when I came here there was probably better facilities at Fulham actually than Newcastle. I got a little bit of a surprise what sort of needed to be done, and what sort of equipment wise and gym wise we sort of didn't have a great facility in Newcastle when I first came. And I think one of my first jobs was getting the oil can out and oiling the multi-gym. At the time, the old-fashioned multi-gym there was just a lot of work to do, a lot of sort of organisation, a lot of preparation. But I was up for the job really.
And like when you go in there, is there any thought of saying, right, we need to improve this facility? Did you even think that you had any authority to ask the chairman or whoever it was at that time?
Yes, I mean, I soon realised that we needed to upgrade, and it just needed to be organised. That's the way I felt. It needed to be organised. The injuries needed to be organised. They needed timings. They needed programs. They needed plans. It just felt like I needed to sort of try and get a grip of that really, and just the facility wasn't great. I don't think the club had a lot of money, and probably a lot of money to be able to spend on facilities. So there was a sort of a bit of do it yourself had to be done as well. But it was great. It was enjoyable. It was like I loved it really. I loved sort of organising and trying to sort it out. I mean, that was part of the enjoyment.
And who was the owners then? It wasn't Freddie Shepherd and
No, we had a board of directors who it was just like an old-fashioned board of directors really. We had a Gordon McKee, who was a solicitor, and there was the local a local painter and decorator who had a painter and decorator business. Somebody owned I think a butcher's. Somebody owned a sports shop. Somebody else owned a local bus company. There was, so there was a whole cross section of local people who had shares in the club, who had their heart and soul in the club. To be fair, I mean they wanted the best for the club as well, really. So it was an old-fashioned board, I think. So anything, the secretary at the time, who I still keep in touch with, actually, Russell Cushion, he was the one to go through first initially, and then if I put a list of requests in, it went through Russell, and then went to the board, then came back to Russell, and then had the answer after that. Really, so it was quite old-fashioned, but it was 1984,
And what was it like working with Jack Charlton?
Great. Jack was just a real Geordie, and just a normal person, but obviously very knowledgeable and a very sort of strong character, very strong personality. Jack, to be fair, looked after me. Jack, wasn't there long with Jack really, but Jack, over the time I was there, was always asking how I was, did I need anything, and so yes, I mean it was only a short time with Jack, but I had a lot of respect for Jack really. Great football man, I mean, obviously he proved that really.
And then, like, in terms of this is obviously all pre-Premier League. So when the transition between that period when you're there for 7 or 8 years, I guess it was, before the Premier League came in, like what was that era like? And then when the Premier League was coming in, like how did that change for you?
Well, it was. I think the real change for me was probably. I mean, I had after Jack, there was Willie McFall and Jim Smith, Ozzy Ordeles, who, you know, I got on with them all, really. Worked under, you know, I'm still learning my profession. And I think, you know, when Kevin Keegan came into the club, the board had changed as well. There was a takeover of the club. John Hall, Freddie Shepherd, and, you know, sort of took over the club then. And the club just changed, really. I mean, you know, it went. John Hall, one of the first things he came to me and said, right, I want you to go to the States with the club doctor and have a look at all the facilities. Anywhere you want to go, you have a look there. We're going to build a new training ground. We're going to do this. I want you to, you know, there's your remit, off you go. So we did. I mean, Keith Beveridge, we went to Boston. We went to Harvard University. We went to Boston University. We went to Boston Celtic. We went, you know, we sort of looked at all facilities. We went to myself and Paul Ferris, who came to join me as a physiotherapist. We went to the Athletic Trainers Association conference, which I hadn't even heard of, but we soon sort of, once we were moving in over the States, we're right, okay, the athletic trainers were like sports physios, and their conferences are still are, you know, like 10,000 delegates, and there was, you know, the exhibition and everything like that was like, we went over there, we looked at, you know, Dallas Cowboys training ground we went to, so we were suddenly we were in a different world altogether, really. It was exciting. It was like we were building up potentially a new training ground with the plans, everything. The team were like unbelievable. We just, the team of the entertainers at that time, we just kept winning, you know, and so the whole club was just suddenly rocketed up into, you know, a different sort of stratosphere. Really, it was a great time. For that 4 or 5 years was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then Kevin left, and then obviously Freddie Shepherd took over, and the sort of, it kept on going, it kept on improving. But then it changed again. The sort of Mike Ashley sort of was then taking over the club, and the plans seemed to go from, well, certainly at that time, from the new training ground. John Hall was involved, and then when John left and Freddie Shepherd sort of left, those sort of was shelved really for a spell, and obviously it was a big sort of takeover or transition for the club as well.
Yeah, I mean, it'll come back to that takeover bit, but like that, I remember that era in the mid 90s. I remember going up we went on a summer holiday. We went up to Newcastle with my family, and the absolute buzz around St James's Park. I think you just got promoted. Andy Cole was there, and it was just absolutely electric. The stadium was really impressive. Like, this was not the way it is now, but it was just, they're just an amazing club. Because when you got promoted, but then didn't you finish? You finished like third or something, or fourth in your first season.
Yeah, I think for the first few seasons we were I'm sure runners up the first season, then third, and then, you know, I think we dropped slightly, but we were still sort of, you know, high up then. And I mean, it was just it was the period where we couldn't stop winning, really. We never won anything, but we nearly won the Premiership. I mean, it was that time when Manchester United pipped us, and it was such a sort of a heartache, really, at that time. But I mean, we nearly did it anyway. But that was involved in that period. For me, you know, I'll never forget that for as long as I live, really, you know. So Kevin was just unbelievable as a man manager and a manager, and the whole place it just was snowballing positivity all the time, really.
And that's what it seemed like from the outside. But was that the mindset? Was like Kevin Keegan, did he pretty much predict or expect that you would get promoted and then to be challenging? Was that something that was discussed?
I think it was everybody just believed it, I think. And everybody, all the players, all the staff and players that he brought in just seemed to happen, I mean, great players. And as a staff as well, we just believed. It was one of those, I've never experienced it before. But every game you were playing, you just expected to win. And we were winning well as well, beating teams well at that time. And it's just it was just an ongoing thing, and it was just snowballing all the time, really.
Mm. And then what was it like from your perspective? Like you may have had the inside track on this, but when Andy Cole got sold and you got Keith Gillespie, and like how surprised were you by that, or how much did you know? Because that really seemed like that just happened overnight.
I think it was yes, it was a bit of a shock. But again, I think everybody believed in Kevin, and I think we thought, right, he's obviously got something on his sleeve here, that it wasn't going to be left at that really, and it wasn't, so you just expected something to happen really. Every day something was happening.
Yeah, well, the team definitely didn't get weaker. Like you got Ferdinand and then obviously Shearer. So what was it like when these players were coming through? Because again, it was just like the best team to watch without a shadow of a doubt. Then even with United winning things, Newcastle were just incredible.
Yes, I mean, getting these players in were, you felt as a club that we were just getting better and bigger, and there might be no stopping us really. Alan Shearer obviously he was a Geordie lad, and he was that was an exciting period. I mean, even when all the time he was here, I mean, he never stopped scoring really, and it was just again, I've never sort of experienced that since really. You just somebody who you would watch go out, and you would just expect them to score every game. And it's a really positive feeling when you're involved in that.
Mm. And what's it like when you get someone like Shearer? So he joined in '96, didn't he? After like the incredible Euros. Like, what's it like when you've got someone of that stature that comes in?
I think yes, I think you're always any new person you meet. I think it takes you a little while to sort of try and weigh them up. Obviously, they're weighing you up as well, and I think. But he was sort of a great Mickey taker, really, and I think that sort of put everybody else at ease. And I think the fact that he was a Geordie actually, and I think that probably helped. I think it was and you know yourself. Sometimes there's a chemistry between you and a different person or a player, and there was a chemistry there, and so that was there was no sort of worries there. It was just again a positive feeling really.
Yeah, I mean, I apologise. I'm just like a fan at this point of all these teams. It's like, so I remember, like, I'm an Everton fan, but I remember all my mates were Liverpool fans, and I remember watching those 2 consecutive games at Anfield, the 4-3 games.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Certainly that first one, which is maybe the best game I've ever seen in the Premier League.
Yeah, well, I've seen it. Funny enough, I've seen it so many times again, and you never stop. Me and our kid man Ray Thompson, who's a great friend of mine. Ray's been here the majority of the time that I've been here, and we just relive the moment and the sort of the feeling of the goals, and it's at the time certainly the one, the main one, it was just I don't know, really. It was just a disbelief more than anything else. It was like when you saw it happening at the period, and even when you watch it now, you get the same feeling. It doesn't make you feel you don't feel any better. That's certainly, the feeling. You probably feel a little bit worse actually, because you think, if only, we'd done whatever. But no, there's a picture of obviously Kevin and Terry slumped over the hoardings at the front, and and I think we were all sort of in that frame of mind, really.
Yeah, and then so Keegan, he left, was it Dalglish that came in next, or Hullett?
Yeah, it was Kenny Dalglish came in, and we did. I mean, we did well with Kenny. Sort of carried it on, really, and we got to cup final, and Kenny. Yes, I mean Kenny was a great man, great manager, and Kenny left, and then Ruud Hullett after that.
And how was that then? Because I
keep forgetting the sequence and the way my managers were.
Yeah, well, no, you've had a lot of them. No, I'm trying to remember it as well. But I remember Hullett came in and he'd been at Chelsea, hadn't he? And how did you see that change from the managers of like Keegan had been, ultra successful, albeit not winning anything, but then it sort of seemed to tail off a little bit under that era.
Yes, I mean, I think at the time in your job, you're concentrating on your job, you're trying to do your job and not get. I've never tried to, outwardly get that involved. It's not our job to do that, really. So you could tell it was sort of dipping, obviously. And there was, I was aware of unrest amongst some of the players and Ruud at that time, so you were aware of something going on, and maybe it wasn't a great sort of period, but I think Bobby came in after that, and again it just sort of took off again, really.
Yeah, no, it did seem to that really just kind of flipped pretty much straight away, wasn't it? As soon as Robson came in. But like if you're having like sort of troubling times there, I'm sure players like are talking to you. Like how easy is it for you to kind of be, because you're employed by the club, but obviously linked with the management and non-playing staff. How difficult is that for you?
I think they probably trust you. I think it's a position of trust. I think I've always tried to keep that. I think you've got to be a good listener, in our role, as you know. I think that's where it stops. I think you can show empathy, but I think you shouldn't get involved. And I've never really got involved in that type of thing. So you're aware of things happening, you listen, but I think really for me, there's sort of maybe a line to make sure that you don't cross, really. And managers aren't stupid either. They don't need their physio to run to them and tell them what's going on. They know, they know themselves. Their coaches know. So that's what normally happens. They're aware of things happening anyway, really.
Yeah, and then I'll ask you about Duncan Ferguson as well. I was gutted when we sold him to Newcastle at that point, but what was it like when he came in?
Duncan did really well with Alan. Really, I mean they had a great partnership. I mean Duncan had a couple of injuries when he was here. He was obviously he was a big lad, big strong lad, but probably had the frame maybe to, he might pick up a couple of injuries. But as a person, got a lot of respect for Duncan, and I think he's fondly remembered by Newcastle supporters, really. And he was as hard as nails, which they obviously like. But himself and Alan did well together. The time, there was a famous time when they were both left out the team, and I mean, from Beirut Hullet, and I think that was probably the end of Rude, actually. But yeah, Duncan, we got in early the next morning in the training ground, and Duncan was there already outside the door, so he was ready.
Yeah, yeah, that was against Sunderland, wasn't it? I think they dropped him for that game. Yeah.
Always remember the conditions. The weather was atrocious, and the night itself was getting beat off Sunderland at home is disastrous, really.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. So yeah, Bobby Robson comes in and obviously changed it round, just really moving up the league again. But you had that really entertaining feel. Do you think that is something that is embedded within the club, that it's people want them to be entertaining?
Yes, I mean the fans are very much along that vein, really. And they took to Bobby straight away. He was Geordie, and he knew them really. I think sometimes you've got to know what they want, and you've got to know our supporters, and he did, and he sort of they had a massive amount of respect for him, really. And we all did, I mean, he was a lovely man, and you had a lot of respect for him. And he used to little things, I mean, I'm from the same neck of the woods as him in County Durham, and he would often pull me into his office and just talk about home, really. And it was just nice, he was a good man, I think that's what people liked and respected as well.
Yeah, no, he seemed it. Yeah, everyone seemed to absolutely love him. Certainly after he left England, everyone seemed to have no one had a bad word to say about him.
Sure.
Yeah, so in terms of the change of ownership then, so when Mike Ashley came in, did it have a direct impact on you and the medical team?
Probably not, I think, as such. I mean, I think that it was just a different remit for the club itself, and I think probably a different feel. I think, certainly when Sir John left and sort of Freddie was there, the plans for the training ground were sort of shelved, really, which was a big disappointment. I think as a physiotherapist, and as yourself, any sort of the idea of a new facility, it's like kids in the toy shop, really, and it was, when that was taken away and sort of that was finished for the foreseeable future, that was a big disappointment, because I think you can expand and grow as a medical team and department, and you look into new ideas and research, and I think probably the feeling of that we sort of stagnated a little bit in our department, and I think there was just after the initial positivity, I think there was obviously a negative feel from the fans, and so the period was, I think there was just sort of a bit of a cloud above the club, in the best way to describe it, really. And the impact on us was, we got on, our job was our job. We got on and tried to do the job to the best of our ability, and I wouldn't sort of think of doing anything else, really. And that was, but I think the club probably, in history will show it's probably sort of stagnated a little bit.
Yeah. And do you have any communication with anyone? Obviously not, well, I'm presuming not Mike Ashley, but any director of football or anything like that? Do they speak with the backroom team?
Yeah, I mean, Lee Charnley was the chief executive, and Lee was he was sort of in constant contact, I think, with Paul Catterson, our doctor, head of medical. So there would be that sort of line of command, chain of command, really. But Lee was sort of sympathetic, I think, to our requests, and I don't. To be fair, I think the club have never, if we wanted anything or needed anything, I've never had a situation where apart from anything major, maybe the big sort of money, the day-to-day running of things, we wouldn't be turned down. They've always tried to sort of help the medical side, really.
And you must have worked with a lot of people there now. I know you've got your former colleague at your former student colleague Dave Galley back there now.
Yes, I mean, Dave, we did work with the under-21s for about 6 years together, 6 or 7 years. But we knew each other obviously from Pinderfields, and had always kept in touch. But we sort of were pretty close at that time when Stuart Pearce was manager of the under-21s. And we've always been close, really. And I think, but I've had, there's been good physiotherapists here. Davy Henderson, who's now at Motherwell. Paul Ferris, who's actually, went to be trained as a barrister. Actually, Paul was a good physio, but then came to me one day and said, I'm going to do a law degree. And I started laughing, really. He says, no, I'm serious. I want to do a law degree. I'm going to become a barrister. And he did, so me and Paul are close still. And he lives in the northeast. Davy Henderson, Sean Beach now, James Haycock, there's been good physiotherapists who have been and who are still here. Daniel Marty, who's the Spanish who came with Rafa. I mean, Daniel's still here, so he puts a different sort of perspective on things as well, which has been quite good. And there's been a lot of therapists, soft tissue lad, some good people have worked here, really, who I've, loved working with them all. Michael Harding, who, was very close to me. Michael left here, went with Robbie Fowler to India. But some good lads, some great therapists, really.
And how much the community outside of Newcastle? Like, I know Dave's been to various different clubs. You work with Mark Leather, who again has done various different clubs, including Sunderland. So, like, how do you network with other physios much?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't say I was great on sort of social media. I'm probably from a different generation. I have to get little tips from my boys, really. But I do try and I certainly, if we have a conference or whatever, it's nice to see everybody and I'll have a drink with them. But seeing these lads over the years, and it's nice when you see them at games still. But yeah, there's some good lads out there. Good, there's some obviously some very good physiotherapists, very good academics now, and I think the game is probably, our profession has changed a little bit as well. But I think ultimately it's still a very sort of caring profession, and I think it's we haven't got to forget that bit either, really.
Yeah, I was chatting with Gary Lewin not long ago, and he was talking about the fact that he's similar sort of time to you when he came through. It was literally 4 of them in the whole backroom team, pretty much. And how have you found that change from you being a one-man medical department through to now being part of a 10 plus, I would have thought?
Yes, I mean, strange, really. I mean, your job is broken down, I think, into compartments now. Like I said, we used to be everything. When I first came to Newcastle, I used to go out, take the warm-ups, come back in, do the injuries, then massage them, then make you just did everything. I used to take the food orders. I used to do the fish and chips after it's just like, the whole remit really. But now you've got, there's 4 or 5 of physios, soft tissue therapists. We've got, head of performance, sports scientists, strength and conditioning. So I think everything's sort of broken down. We've got lads who, Sean Beach is head of rehabilitation and specialise in rehab. So it's like, but I think it's the right way to go. I think people are specialising in certain areas, but I think it's making sure everything is still working and pulling together. And somebody's not a lone ranger, if you like, and just off on a tangent. I think you've got to make sure that if you are a department of 10, 12 people, you need to know what everybody's doing. That communication has to be tip top. You have to have meetings all the time, and sometimes you are having meetings about a meeting, but I think you need to know what's going on. You need to be organised, really. But it's fascinating to see, and I think when I'm gone and retired, and I think it'll become even more specialised, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next sort of 10, 15 years, really.
Yeah. And have you have any thoughts or approaches to move on? Have you ever thought you might want to do something else, or have you always been happy with doing what you're doing?
I'm happy, really. I'm going to retire at 66, and I'm nearly 64. So for me, I've got another 2 years here, 2 and a bit years. I've told the club know that, and I think I'll have done 40 years then. I think that's enough, really. It's just, I don't want to be tottering around the treating room at 70-year-old, and I think enough is enough at a certain time, and I'll go away, and I'll hopefully work 100% for the next couple of years and enjoy it. But I think then that'll be it. I think it'll be as long as I can come back and watch the games, and but it'll be nice to see. I'm probably leaving when we're going to get a new training ground. We're going to get new facilities. Getting all of this new. The club's taken off, and I'm going to be retiring, really. So, but that's the circle of life, really.
Yeah. And then in terms of like the overall picture of things, like you've had loads of different memorable experiences, I'm sure, but are there any ones that particularly stand out for you?
I think the periods. I think really, I think certainly the one period would be that sort of Keegan Entertainers period. Is probably stand out more than any other time. Looking back, it's funny because Arthur Cox was one of the assistant managers at the time, and Arthur used to say to me and Ray the kit man, remember this for the rest of your life, because this will never happen again. He said this, and I never, and me and Ray talk about this now, and we probably now know what he means, because there was such a period, and it probably, well, certainly I won't experience it again, so but hopefully it'll happen at the club, and the club will be successful in the future, and the club it'll always be there, so you just hope that eventually they start winning trophies and the fans are happy, really.
Yeah, so as a former player, just from your own experience and thoughts on this, who do you think's the most talented player? Like I can think of loads of great ones in that, certainly in the Keegan era, but who would you say?
I think there's a few, actually. I think at that time, I think talent-wise, David Ginola was unbelievable to see. Peter Beardsley was an unbelievable talent. I mean, unbelievable, really. Gaza was a 16-year-old when I first came in. I remember thinking, my God, that he's unbelievable, that kid. He was only 15 16 like a cheeky Geordie, really. And his ability was, he shone even at that age. You know, amongst all the players that were there at 16-year-old, he was the best player, really. And, you know, obviously Alan Shearer for his all-round talent, you know, goal scorer and everything. But we've had some great players here when I've been here. But I think, you know, I think sort of, you know, when you think of real talent, you've got to think of Gascoigne, Beardsley, Shearer, you know, Ginola, Ferdinand, you know, these players really. Joy, it's been a pleasure to, you know, lucky to be around at the time when they played, really.
Yeah, yeah, completely forgot about Gazza. That's a bit before my era when he was at Newcastle. But yeah, so what time did he leave then? Because he went to Tottenham from there. But like, was he only about 20 or something when he left?
Yeah, I mean, Gazza was very young, really. I think Willie McFall might have been manager when Gazza was sold. But the club at the time, I mean, if he was here now, you just wouldn't sell him and you wouldn't have to sell him. And I think, but, you know, the club at the time, you know, any sort of, unfortunately, that was the thing. Any sort of big money for a player was, you know, players were sold, really. Chris Waddle, you know, Peter Beardsley, they're all sold at that time. But all Geordie lads, you know, if you'd kept them, you know, it would have been a fantastic sort of group growing up, really.
Yeah, well, when we sold Beardsley to Newcastle, I was devastated because he was a great player, unbelievable, and he still was into his mid and late 30s, wasn't he? He was just an unbelievable player. So, last question: who would you say has had the most influence on you, both in physio or in general?
I think in the game, I think it's a very difficult question, really. I think it's. I think initially it was probably Fred Street was a big influence in making and in pointing me in the right direction. So I'll always be grateful for Fred. And Fred was, you know, he's a great man, really. Within the sort of football world, if you like, there's been sort of Kevin, Bobby Robson, you know, like great managers, really. I mean, I could be on for the next half an hour with. There's people on the medical side. There's people on the football side. There's a lot of great, you know, there is a lot of great people in football, and you know, people, it gets a bad sort of press now and, you know, now and again, obviously, and you know, the same. Our club has had a bad press at times, but you know, there's a lot of good people, behind the scenes in football clubs. You know, there's a lad here who's, you know, been team administrator, who's worked here longer than I have, and you know, it's people like that who are the heart and soul and heartbeat of the club, really. Tony Toward, you know, I mean, Tony's been here. I think he's been here since the 1920s, and but he's telling everybody he's still only 50-year-old. So it's just like, you know, but people like that is they're very, very important, really, to football clubs. So I haven't answered your question, have I, really?
No, you have. You've given me a few. No, I can see it's a difficult question, but it's good to see that you've had so many different positive influences and ranges from medical to non-medical. So no, I think that's really good. But certainly seems promising for the club with the new ownership and the investment and so on. So
I mean, you know, not forgetting your family. Your family have a lot of sort of how can you say, you know, sacrifices to make for you know, it's like in football, you're working 24/7 a lot of time, and you know, your family give a lot of things up, really, and you know, so that's one thing I'm looking forward to when I'm retired. You know, I need to give a bit of time back to them, really.
yeah, no, absolutely. No, well, I really appreciate you giving your time today, and it is pretty incredible you're going to be doing 40 years there. So well done on that. That is a remarkable achievement.
Thank you.
No problem. Right. Well,
I'll make the next 2 years.
No, I'm sure you will. No, well, good luck for the rest of the season. I know you've got big games coming up. I know one of them's against Everton soon, so good luck for that one. But yeah, no, best of luck. I really appreciate your time, and I hope to catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Andy.
Brilliant. Cheers, Derek. Thank you. Sorry, Dennis. Thank you. Thank you.